Hey Queens, welcome to the Sister Circle podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing candid conversations, information, and resources regarding women's health, mental health, motherhood, and wellness. And I am your homegirl and host, Faith Alaribe. So go ahead and get comfortable, Queen. Let's dig in. Hey Queens, what's up, what's up? I'm well. For Mother's Day, I got a delicious nap in. It's one of those naps that are so good you could taste it. A new Peloton, and I had some silence. So Mother's Day for your girl has left me feeling wonderful. And it is my hope that all of the mothers, the aunties, the godmamas, and villagers all had a fabulous Mother's Day as well. We thank you. So speaking of mamas, I'm really excited about today's guest. My homegirl, my mama friend, Natasha, is going to be joining us and sharing her story. She's going to be sharing her story about how downplaying her pain after pregnancy landed her in the hospital in ICU for 3 weeks with her newborn at home. How her second pregnancy left her injecting Lovenox into her belly once a day. The importance of intentionality as it relates to parenting girls, and so much more. But listen, I'm not going to tell you all about it. You got to listen in. So with no further ado, let's get into it. Who is Natasha? I'm sure the listeners want to know. Who is Natasha?
Thank you so much, Faith. The feeling is absolutely mutual. You are definitely a mother, unexpected mother friend, and a much needed support system throughout this time. My name is Natasha Shabazz, and I am a mom of two beautiful little girls. We are part of the 2 Under 2 crew. And I'm also a proud wife, daughter, sister, friend. Professionally, I am a marriage family therapist, currently not practicing. Instead, I'm actually a director of community engagement at a local nonprofit in Trenton, New Jersey.
Awesome. So listen, boss mommy, that's how I should have introduced you, right? That's awesome. So listen, I think that all things for me right now is like about the 4th trimester, right? All about postpartum. And so I'm kind of curious to know, because I know that each pregnancy is a different experience, but so is each postpartum experience, right? So just out of curiosity, what was your postpartum experience like, maybe with your first child?
Sure. So I will say, even pregnancy was very different between both girls. The first one, I felt all the magical vibes that a pregnant woman would like to feel. I was that person that would wear heels, from time to time. I was at my baby shower wearing those heels, very excited to dance around. Again, feeling just super magical about being pregnant and creating human life. Mm-hmm. I gave birth to my first daughter, and I had a very straightforward, healthy pregnancy, I would say. And I delivered by C-section, and everything seemed to be going pretty normal.
So tell me this, Natasha, I'm sorry to cut you off, but really quick. So you delivered via C-section. Was it planned or was it an unexpected cesarean?
Sure. It was planned, I guess you can say. I was told a week before delivery that it would be considered a C-section. My first daughter was growing considerably large. And so out of precaution, they explained obviously what happens with shoulder dystocia, the possibilities of delivering a bigger sized baby for my frame. And so it was a conversation. I ended up not dilating as much. And so I was pretty much ready to go. And I did have an understanding that I would have a C-section that first time around.
Okay. Were you scared to have a C-section?
Initially, I was, but I think the conversation, the way that my OB approached it was very, very comfortable. It was an uncomfortable setting. She really explained it in terms of not necessarily instilling fear in me, which I enjoyed. I really appreciated that about her. She reassured me that this was something that was my decision and we would ultimately try whatever we could. But if this was the decision and the way that if I was not essentially contracting as much, that that a C-section was not something that would be out of the picture. And so I didn't go into it with fear. I did a little research, but I didn't overwhelm myself with research because I did not want to instill fear.
Yeah, absolutely. I myself, I've had 2 cesareans, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't as bad as I anticipated. And I felt like it gave me a little bit of a sense of control. Like I knew when it was going to happen. You know what I mean? So it was good for me.
Yes.
Awesome. So you have the cesarean section, you bring this beautiful baby girl home, so you're excited. So what was it like? Like you came home with your husband, you have the baby. What happened from there?
So we get home and we are very excited, obviously, to do things on our own. We prepped my parents, my sister. I kind of said, let's make sure that my husband and I get to experience the first couple of days as a new family of 3. And very quickly, I called my mom, and pretty much with this journey of breastfeeding and feeling overwhelmed, feeling like I didn't know what I was doing, as much as I thoroughly enjoyed being pregnant, as much as I've always wanted to be a mom, here I was in that moment. I had my newborn, and I couldn't fight that feeling where I wanted the support of my mom. And so throughout that time, everything was pretty much, what you read in terms of breastfeeding can be challenging, feeling tired. You don't really get consecutive hours of sleep with a newborn. And so I thought things were going normal and as planned. And 3 weeks later, I was experiencing these mini episodes where I would feel nauseous. I would throw up. I felt like I would pass out probably within that moment, within that second. And it lasted only 2 to 3 minutes. So it wasn't a long period of time that would, I guess, warn me to say, let me call 911. My husband witnessed the second time that it happened. And he did ask me, he said, I think you should go to the hospital. It was 2 a.m. There was no, we were just by ourselves. And I said, well, how would I do that? I'm not going to go to the hospital. Our baby's here. You're left alone. Like, I could not think that part of it. But clearly it was a sign that my body was sending me a message saying, hey, something's not right. And yet I was just so involved in getting through the stage of having a newborn and doing what I needed to do. And I just thought it was your typical feeling tired. Maybe something had to do with my C-section, and that I would follow up with my OB during my 6 weeks postpartum visit.
So wait a minute. So talk to me a little bit about this. So you were having these mini episodes, and how many times a day, say, in any given instance would this happen?
It honestly only happened 3 full times, but it was scary enough that I almost would land on the floor, essentially, from passing out, from feeling these, a combination of symptoms. The second time, again, because my husband witnessed it, it was an added kind of stressor of, okay, something is wrong. But again, being a new mom, a first-time mom, I wasn't really focused on myself. I just knew we have a 6-week postpartum visit scheduled, and I would go there and I would tell her, hey, this is what's been going on. And maybe she would, indicate otherwise, but I didn't even get to that point. Let's just put it that way. I didn't get to my 6-week postpartum visit.
So you are feeling this way. This episode's happened 3 times. So then what happens?
Sure. So the third time it happened, it was actually the day of my husband and I's wedding anniversary. And we said we'd go to Philly for a nice dinner out. It would be our first time having dinner by ourselves. My parents came down to, babysit our newborn. And
that's exciting, girl.
So excited. I put my lipstick on. I had my hair done. I was ready. So much so that I had that episode, as I mentioned before, with those symptoms during the day, and my husband was at work. So I had that episode, and I was like, you know what, Tosh, get it together. We're going to go to dinner. We're going to have a good night. We'll deal with this tomorrow. I was just excited to go. And on the ride there, I still felt a lot more symptoms happening at once. It was no longer the 2-minute warning, the 3-minute warning of an episode. It was, no, I seriously feel ill. And so in that moment, my husband and I knew. We turned around, we said, I need to go to the ER.
So you were consistently feeling like nauseous and like all of these symptoms, right? For a consecutive amount of like, so it was longer than 2-3 minutes, but it's, you know, the entire car ride. So,
correct.
Okay. And so what do you call your mom and dad and like, hey, mom and dad, you know, plans have changed.
basically, they already had, well, my mom already knew that I was having these kind of mini episodes. But again, you know, I think we didn't really pay much attention. I didn't think much of it. I didn't pursue it as something that I needed to talk to my doctor about. But in that moment on the car ride, I knew, like, I absolutely was not feeling myself, and it was getting worse and worse. By the time I got to the ER, I kid you not, Faith, I basically was passed out in the bathroom because I had to wait. There was a wait time, obviously, to get admitted or just be seen.
Right.
By the time they called my name, you know, some of this stuff is also blurry because I was unconscious. And by the time they put me in the ER section, I felt like I was experiencing a heart attack. I felt I could not breathe.
Oh my
I
gosh.
cannot describe the amount of pain that I felt in my upper chest, but I couldn't speak. And
wait, you couldn't, so the pain took your breath away?
Yes,
wow.
I did. I was panicking, and I've never felt anything like this in my entire life. The pain that I felt that night in particular, I thought I was dying. So my husband
was
yelling for a doctor, because at this point, you know, let's be honest, ERs, and shout out to our ER nurses. They do an amazing job. I know that they have a hard job. But unfortunately, depending on where you go, there are different ER wait times. And I happen to have gone to a smaller hospital, and whether it's capacity issues, I'm not sure what actually happened that night. But when I tell you I was waiting for that doctor, and it felt like an eternity, that I was having this feeling of out of breath and the pain, my husband had never seen me that way. I still kind of get emotional thinking about this day, because I was basically telling him my last wishes about having my newborn and how to raise her.
So Natasha, girl.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Yes. I have never experienced something like that in my entire life. And I think, you know, looking back in that moment, the doctor came in. I do remember that part. And he kept on saying to me, please tell me where it hurts. And I just, I don't even know what was happening in my body at that moment. All I know is I had plans, and I was ready to go out for an anniversary date. So they probably were like, wait a minute, are you really okay? What's going on? But in actuality, you know, I can't describe the level of pain. But at that point, the doctor he tried to assess where the pain was coming from. Next thing I know, you know, I thought maybe one night I'll be admitted. No, that began an almost 3-week full stay at that hospital without my child, without my newborn.
What? So wait. So you were in the hospital for 3 weeks. You're just giving birth. What was the diagnosis like?
Yeah. So actually what happened, and this was something that was never brought up or raised during my pregnancy. As I mentioned before, I didn't really have any health concerns going into my first pregnancy. I guess I would consider myself pretty healthy. There were no red flags. And so what had happened was I had a gallstone that got stuck in this very small tube called our bile duct. And what happened was, when that closed off, it created a cyst that kept on growing and growing. And that ended up becoming pancreatitis, what's known as pancreatitis. Pancreatitis, if you Google it, or if you know, have experienced it, normally actually pancreatitis happens when people drink an excessive amount, Or in my case, it was because my organs were literally getting blocked, and the cyst, it was a pseudocyst, meaning it was not cancerous, but it was growing and growing, and it was creating a massive amount of pain. Basically, my 3-week stay at that hospital was mostly pain management. And that experience, oof,
So
like,
wait a minute. So did it have to rupture, or like what were you waiting for the thing?
exactly. So that is a great question, because as I stayed in this hospital, I was asking all the questions. I had family, I had my 2 best friends. Everyone's asking, what is happening? What's going on? I couldn't even actually go through an MRI scan because they place something over your belly, right? That's a little weighted. It's not too heavy. I could not actually, that could not lay on top of me. That's how bad my insides hurt, my outside hurt, everything hurt. And so the level of pain medication that they were giving me at the time, it was not as much to treat what was actually happening in my body. So what I mean is, every 4 hours, typically they administer pain medication. By the time 2.5 hours came up, and I consider myself, I was raised to be a graceful person and have manners and be polite. Man, when you feel like you're dying, or you feel like you cannot control what's happening inside your body, I was just screaming out of pain. And my family, my best friends, I was witness, I'm sure they can look back at that time and say, I would never expect you to have that level of, just, it's an out of body control experience, that you're asking for medication and things are not happening as fast as you need them to happen.
I mean, what I'm finding to be like completely fascinating, like the level of pain that you experienced must have been excruciating, because it's like literally like a weighted blanket, like may have been
Yes.
1 pound, if that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So you weren't
Yes.
being administered the amount of pain management medication. You're asking all of these questions. You're not getting the answers. You are becoming this, this angry person, and folks are like,
Yes.
I don't even recognize who you are.
Yes.
3 weeks comes and it goes, and they send you home.
Well, no, right before that. So about a weekend, I will call her an angel sent, a woman, Dr. Ray. She walked in to my room because basically what was happening was a rotation of doctors were visiting, because they couldn't, at that point, they didn't have a specific diagnosis. They knew something was happening. They could acknowledge that there was a cyst growing. They acknowledged pancreatitis based on the level of pain that I was experiencing. But because I had to wait for that MRI time in order to get, the swelling was significant inside. Basically I was just waiting for this medication. So this woman comes, and she was a gastroenterologist, and she walked in the room and she said, what are you guys doing, to the hospitalist? And this is where I am hoping to be as vocal as possible moving forward in my life about this experience, because I think it is important. I consider myself, again, educated, grounded. I would like to think that I would speak up for myself if something, or someone else, if something was happening and it wasn't right, or I thought otherwise. And this particular doctor said to her, well, yes, I know she's experiencing that level of pain, and they're talking in front of me, right? And I had other family members in this room and another best friend in this room. And he goes, we just can't up her medication because people like that get addicted. And I said, excuse me?
People like that?
What? Yes. And I said, first of all, I'm in the mental health field. I'm very aware of addiction, whether or not you're in the mental health field or not. I am understanding, right? And I know that anyone can fall in that category. I'm literally in this bed, lying in this bed, not with my newborn.
But wait a minute, I want to know what he meant by people like that.
Oh, yes. And you have to remember context. I'm sitting there halfway drugged, right? To level out this pain. But I heard what I heard. And I looked up and I was like, wait, did I hear that correctly? No, I did. And the doctor stated that Dr. Rye that I mentioned, an angel above, came and she was my advocate. She said, no, this is absolutely not right. What you're doing here is not right. Within hours, she had to advocate on my behalf. Within hours, I was moved to the ICU.
Wait, so your case was that extreme? You weren't?
Yes.
Girl,
yes.
Get out of here.
And I, again, didn't realize the severity of the situation because, as I'm mentioning, doctors were kind of coming in and out. I just know I experienced pain, severe pain at that. I had no medical issues, no background that would lead them to believe, that there were other things to look into. There was nothing. And so when this woman came in and she knew just the level of medication that they were giving me, the fact that I have already been there for a week and there had been no progress on sending me to a specialist. And so this is the other kind of takeaway, at least from my experience. I knew, and I actually had vocalized, just discharge me. I don't know where I need to go, but I cannot die here. I just had a newborn. That is the level of helplessness I felt. My family, my friends, I'm talking about a group of people that we can defend ourselves in any given day. And we actually, most of us have jobs that do that work.
Trying to defend folks, right?
Yeah. So I'm sitting there going, well, why, how did I get here? And why do I feel like I'm stuck and I'm just waiting to die, essentially?
So so what I'm trying to figure out is this, so they have this rotation of doctors that's coming in and out to see you, right? Have they assigned you like you are my point doctor?
So there was one doctor that I guess within the healthcare system is so fascinating, I will say it that way, but the hospitalist, their job really, it depends on how many nights they have in a row. So I would see a set hospitalist, the doctor on call for 3 nights in a row, and then a new hospitalist would come in. Now, specialist, and that's what I really needed, was somebody, whoever was at the hospital, when they realized, hey, I'm not sure what's going on with this girl, they should have called, or they should have, transferred to a specialist. And so let's just say these 3 weeks. Oh
man, your baby's at home with your mama and daddy.
Yes. Well, mostly, let's just say this. My biggest downfall, or I guess the pain that I experienced, the upside to it all is that my husband had never changed a diaper before we had our first daughter. Right? So he is a loving, very vibrant person. And so he'll figure it out. I know he would have figured it out. But think about it. As a new mom, you're thinking 1,000 thoughts. I could barely think because I'm in so much pain. So yes, my parents luckily were also in the house. But I say this, that the best thing that could have came out of this situation was he really established himself as a father, without me being over his shoulder and saying, change the diaper this way, do it that way. And I just know myself. And so it served him very well in this scenario.
Yes, because the daddies love to be needed, and we need them to feel happy about all that they do to support. Absolutely.
Yes.
So, okay. Natasha, girl, this is deep. Like, it is. Not only are you experiencing physical pain, you can't be there with your child, right? Your partner is there with you, supporting you. So by the time that you see a specialist and you get home, is your pain finally managed? Like, are you good to go?
So essentially what happened was the swelling went down. The cyst remained pretty large. And so I did get transferred, thank God, to that angel sent. Dr. Rye was able to send me to a specialist at Jefferson Hospital in Philadelphia. And they have an actual center dedicated to this work. And I will also give a shout out to Dr. Austin Chang. He's on all social media platforms. He's amazing, whether or not you have any gastro issues or any type of medical concerns. He's just a great person to follow. He really breaks down medical jargon to everyday life and situations that is easy for us to just talk about. And so he ended up doing 4 procedures. I had 4 procedures that followed that 3-week time span and 1 surgery.
Oh, wow.
Not all at once, I will say that. So 4 procedures over a span of 4 months. And then the last procedure, which was getting my gallbladder removed in last November.
Gotcha. So you are healed.
Yeah. So basically after that experience, I really thought that my entire life would change in terms of, when you have pancreatitis, alcohol is a huge trigger. And in the beginning, they were explaining to me, you cannot take a sip of alcohol. It may trigger you, even though you don't have or you did not experience pancreatitis because of alcoholism. In this case, it was different, but you just never know. Depending on how much alcohol you drink, it could trigger pancreatitis in the future. So I would consider myself a social drinker. I like to enjoy myself. And I thought for the rest of my life, I would not be able to take a sip of wine,
oh, girl.
a sip of anything, which in itself was...
I can't even imagine. Mama, no glass of wine or a cocktail.
Yes. And it's different when you're being restricted from the if you make your personal decision, that's great. But when you're restricted because it's more like, hey, you could trigger that pain that you felt like you were going to die. And I didn't want to experience that.
Sure. So you've been alcohol free?
No. Oh, no. So all of that to say, I went to, I did my follow-ups with specialists at Jefferson because I had such a great experience there. And they explained very thoroughly to me that, no, this was an isolated kind of event. It was unfortunate. I basically was a case study for 2 different hospitals. I'm not exaggerating with that. They actually told me, you're so young, your profile, you're healthy, and you just got the worst case scenario of people, if this happens. So if you get gallstones, not everyone that gets gallstones will have pancreatitis. But the way that my thing happened, I just kept on getting worst case scenarios with regard to the situation in my health. But luckily, it took some time. I think I waited almost like 7 months, 8 months to feel like I can take a sip of wine. And so, yes, I've reintroduced alcohol in my life. Yeah. Yeah. And basically, I live a normal life after that experience. It was bizarre. I did not expect any of that, but it definitely impacted how I experienced my second unexpected pregnancy.
Wow. That's a lot. So you were experiencing all of this. How long was your maternity leave from work?
So actually, luckily, my husband and I, as I mentioned before, I'm a marriage family therapist. I did a year at a center in Philadelphia called Masoni Center, providing therapy there. And after that experience, I actually stopped right before I got pregnant, and I was able to focus on trauma-related work in the county that I live in. It was smaller scaled in terms of the hours that I needed to work. And so I had started my journey about thinking about what life would be like as a stay-at-home mom. So luckily, I did not have to relay messages to an employer at that time, which would have been really stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I just couldn't even imagine having to deal with all of that. And then dealing with the pressures of having to go back to a traditional 9 to 5. So, I mean, I get the physical pain, right? I can only imagine what it was like to not be with your child for that extended period of time. And then possibly the anxiety that may have lingered after the fact. As you were experiencing all of this, in that fourth trimester, what was your mental health like?
Coming from a an experience where I normally would be the person to, have the conversations, have healing spaces, hold healing spaces for others. I knew I needed that for myself. Being separated from your child, 3 weeks after giving birth, my first thought was, is my kid going to know I'm her mom? That's like the worst thought that I had, I think, even coming home. I really relied on talking to other moms who maybe not have not experienced that type of separation, but, just validating me that your baby will always know who their mama is. Your baby will smell you. They know what smell, feel like. They've been in you for all these months. And, that is not something that is easily tampered with or forgotten. And so I needed a lot of affirmation from other moms and just my support system, and knowing that my bond with my daughter, is not pretty much, it's not dictated by what happened in those 3 weeks. And that was a hard pill to swallow. So I would say I was struggling a lot with the thoughts of, how do I ensure that I bond with my baby? How do I ensure that I'm strong for my baby? Because yes, I went through this, but I still want to be that mom to my child that, protects her. And I'm glad it was me rather than her, is what I'll say.
So you talked a little bit about support, right? About your parents and your besties who were in the hospital with you. So when you came home and in that first year, did you have a lot of support throughout that? Because, a lot of times what happens is like when you first bring the baby home, everybody's like, oh, let me see the baby, let me see the baby. And then, after, the first month and everybody kind of goes ghost and everything goes back to normal. But did you have a support system kind of like throughout the duration of that time?
Absolutely. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how to thank them and share my gratitude. I had, my two best friends specifically sleep on hospital couches day in, day out, no questions asked. My husband, sacrifices made by my own mom, taking a leave of absence. She's a teacher. And just the amount of support. My own sister, she actually ended up being pregnant with my niece during this time. And, it was just a lot of, I definitely felt the love and support that I needed to get through that time. And the ironic part, like I mentioned before, was I was setting it up to be that independent type of family and mom, and I was ready to do that. And God or whoever had other plans to tell me, you know what, you'll never forget that you need your mom, you need your family, and you need your chosen family. And so, yes, I absolutely had that support.
That's awesome, girl. Listen, support is so, so important. So wait a minute. So you're a mommy of two under two. So girl, so you have this traumatic experience, right? Of, postpartum. You have this beautiful baby. You come back home. You have this community of loved ones all around you. Obviously, you and the hubs are still loving each other because
Well,
then.
yeah, I'm going to blame it on the alcohol.
Oh!
No, I'm just kidding.
After that 7 months, she was like, let's have another day night hubs. Okay.
Exactly.
So then you have another surprise pregnancy.
That's right. Yeah. So actually, the interesting part is it was the beginning of the pandemic when I found out I was pregnant. It was actually the week before the CDC officially announced that there was something called coronavirus and people needed to stay at home. We didn't actually have that full warning sign just yet. And so I was able to tell my immediate family. But other than that, we were basically pandemic baby mode, 1,000%.
Man, it was so many corona babies. And I think that what was so interesting about the corona baby epidemic was the fact that a lot of times you didn't know until the baby got born. It was like, oh, you had a baby too? You had a baby too?
Absolutely.
Like, oh, okay. It was a lot of mamas that I knew. So it's a whole lot of babies. And I love every bit of it. At least, that was something good that we could do right during that time.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So you get pregnant at the very beginning, at the top of COVID. Tell me about it. Was the pregnancy like similar? Were you like walking around like a golden goddess?
Oh, absolutely not. Unfortunately, no. So I was deemed to have, first of all, when I went back to my OB, who was so apologetic for no reason, because it was not her fault, all the events that happened postpartum. I was so happy with my OB. I will say she's a woman of color. She understands some of the anxiety that I had around my postpartum experience and then getting pregnant again. So when I showed up to her office and I'm like, we need to check and we need to make sure. And she goes, oh my God, after everything you just went through, oh my God, this is a miracle. This is so great. I absolutely love her. And she, confirmed essentially that I was pregnant. And what that meant though was that I was considered a high-risk pregnancy because of the events that happened postpartum. Though I was healthy or not healthy, but I would consider back to my new normal after that last surgery in November. I didn't need any medications following that. I have no ongoing type of medications, let's just put it that way. So when I got pregnant again, I thought, oh, okay, this will be similar to my first, but now I know that I can't expect postpartum to look a certain way. I did not expect to be a high-risk pregnancy because, again, I was on no medications. Within the first trimester, then I was told that I would have to take blood thinners and actually inject myself in my stomach every night.
Hold on.
And
wait. So you just said that you were completely healthy, and then after your first trimester, you're having to stick yourself in the stomach and take blood thinners.
So your reaction was my reaction in the doctor's office. And actually, the person who delivered that message to me was the maternal fetal department doctor. He explained thoroughly, essentially what happened was when that pseudocyst grew, I ended up getting a blood clot in my splenic vein. Now, I know nothing about anatomy, and I would have known nothing about my anatomy particularly until this happened to me. So basically, based on that experience with that pseudocyst, it pushed my organs a little bit. And so that blood clot pretty much was still there. It was showing that it was still there. So as we know, when we get pregnant, our blood circulation runs different. We're growing life. And so even though I didn't have any current medication, I wasn't on blood thinners after, anything like that. So that was so mind-blowing to me that when the doctor told me that, I said, well, do I have a choice? Because this sounds strange. I thought I was fine. You guys all told me I'm clear. And I understand now I'm pregnant again. And I understood the rationale was, as you're, growing life and your blood circulation flows differently, you might, blood clot, you might get a blood clot, and that would be worse. And so we have to prevent that part of it before it gets to that point.
But that was the blood thinner. What was the injection for?
It's Lovenox. It's called Lovenox. And that's for preventing that blood clot, any blood clot in the body. So, but I didn't take his word. He said, ultimately, of course, it's your choice. So there was a choice. There's always a choice. And that's also what we have to remember. there is a choice. And in that moment, I left that office and I'm like, well, wait a minute, now we're talking, am I going to have a healthy baby? Am I going to have a healthy pregnancy? I called that specialist in Jefferson in Philadelphia right away. And I said, I need a meeting with you. I need to see you. And they took me right away because, as I said, I was a case study. So they knew me by first name. We were friends at this point. And so the doctor, Dr. Murley is his name. And he said, you know what? He's right. This doctor is right. And so all of that to say, I ended up going on blood thinners about 12 weeks into my pregnancy. And for any mamas that have had hard time conceiving as well with fertility treatments, things like that, I know for me, I didn't have that particular experience, but having to apply these blood thinners to my stomach as my stomach is growing, as your belly's growing, I had all these thoughts about, well, is the injection going to get into the baby? Am I going to hit the baby? Like, you think all these thoughts. And so what did I do? I ran to my phone, Googled social media. I tried to find the hashtag Lovenox just to see pregnancy related kind of conversations around this. And honestly, it was pretty much a lot of women that didn't look like me, that didn't have this experience, that didn't speak out about this experience. And so that made me also realize that a lot of the anxieties that I experienced that happened, but guess what? My baby's 5 months old. She is very healthy.
Yeah.
A lot of that, the questioning, the mental health journey, about having a high risk pregnancy, the emotional toll it takes on you. I'm very glad to share this type of story as well, because it provides just a different level, not just hope, but really some sort of sense of calmness that, sometimes we go through things and we don't trust always medical research or interventions. But in this case, for me at least, it worked out.
Well, one of the things that I will say, and I commend you on, is that I think that it sounds like you learned from that first experience and not advocating for yourself. You did exactly what you were supposed to do by calling that doctor and getting a second opinion, right? Versus this doctor told me to do this, I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to question anything. Right. Absolutely. A lot of times, particularly as women of color, it's kind of, or just people in general, right? It's like we see somebody with a white coat, they tell us to jump, we ask how high, and we just accept that as whatever they tell us to do is truth. So kudos to you for getting that second opinion, for real. I think that that's really, really incredibly important. Oh gosh. So I didn't even think about like the whole injection and as your belly is growing, right? And kind of what that was like. And mama, we were, chatting and texting and DMing during this all, right? How did it what did it feel like when you were actually actively injecting your stomach?
I didn't even think about talking about this tonight, but the one thing that helped me when I started my injections, I knew that I wanted to name my child because I wanted to be able to picture like this life that I was producing, whether it was a boy or a girl. I did not know. Obviously, it was only 12 weeks in and I didn't know at the time. So actually, I had come up with the name Layla, and then the boy name would have been Cairo. And I had already in mind that if I have this name as I was injecting myself, it was just something that I came up with for myself. Nobody told me to do this. It just helped me think of my child and envision what life will be like as they grow. And so for me, naming my child without knowing gender or sex, I took that opportunity to really make it about me and my child and not necessarily the pain, the ickiness, there were many nights I dreaded the time because I knew I kept myself on a schedule that at this time I would take my prenatal pill and I would do my injection. And, naming my baby. And then eventually when I found out it was a girl, I just kind of said her name every single time. I don't have a rhyme or reason. It worked for me.
Yes. But it made the experience human, right?
Yes.
Like it was human. You were growing life, and Layla is her name.
Yes.
So I'm a mother of two girls as well. And being a mother of girls, it is a whole mood. Okay. Listen, my 2-year-old, now she has opinions and everything. The other day, she loves spaghetti, right? I give her spaghetti. She has some slices of avocados, some green beans, and she says, "Mommy, I don't want this." I said, "What do you mean you don't want this?" I'm like, "How are you going to tell me what you don't want? You love spaghetti." She said, "I don't want this. I want oatmeal." I said, "Okay, you can have oatmeal, right?" But nevertheless,
After you just laid out that,
it's like, okay, let me just make you some oatmeal, baby, right? But it's the whole mood. What do you love most about being a mama to girls?
So I love, I do love dressing them up, putting the bows. Both of my girls have very curly hair. So even now, my second born Layla, she has such curly hair. She came out the womb with just a head full of hair. And so I do enjoy that aspect of, dressing them up, putting bows on, but also, I've put bow ties on Savannah before, just
Playing dress
being
up.
with them, playing with them. Yes, yes, I do enjoy that.
So what would you say is the hardest thing?
Facing yourself when you have two girls or one girl.
Say that one more time.
Yes, you have to face yourself. You don't understand how many times I've looked up at my daughter, my toddler, like you're saying, and thought, girl, are you serious right now? And she is dead serious. And then I have to remind myself who her mother is. And I have to look at myself in the mirror.
Right.
It is the hardest thing. It is hard because you literally see, and I don't even want to call her a mini version because she is going to be her own human self.
Yes.
Right? She's going to be herself. But you see personality traits that they're very obvious. People that know my daughter, my first daughter, you just know you'll get the sass, you'll get the glares, you get some shade, since she was a baby.
Being throwing shade since birth, hey?
Yes. We actually were supposed to do for her first birthday, she was going to have a wall called the Savi's wall of shade.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. And we had pictures, but then the pandemic hit, so we didn't get to do that. But, it's really about facing yourself and having lots of patience. And luckily, so I will say the other hard part too is having girls makes me think a lot about my own, having kids in general, right? Makes you think about your own upbringing. And I was raised in a very loving household. I witnessed my parents love each other, love on each other, also parent us with a lot of respect and grace. And so picking and choosing how you're going to parent, right? You either repeat some cycles or say, hey, I hated this part of my childhood, so I'm going to change it. And thinking about that, I will say my parents did such a good job of instilling confidence in me and my sister. And, in a day and age where, we have technology, social media is so, huge. And guess what? There are pros like meeting you. There's been wonderful friendships I've made on social media platforms. So I'm not going to throw that type of shade on media, but it's really thinking about two girls and how we are going to raise two girls to have confidence, understand who they are without just posting filtered pictures. Building self-esteem is really, really key. And I think that's going to be difficult to do and obviously protect them in a world where, unfortunately, they're just, whether boy or girl, scary stuff out there.
Absolutely. It's funny that you talk about confidence. I think that of all the things that I am trying to be like as conscious as possible with my girls, it definitely has to do with like instilling confidence in them. I think that, my upbringing, was different. I didn't grow up in a two-parent home. And I think about how my father not being in the home, and really not having a relationship with him, how it impacted how I view myself and my relationship with men or boys, what have you, kind of moving forward. And so I think that it's really, really important to instill and consciously instill that confidence and build that as an upbringing.
Yes.
Natasha, one of the things that I'm really curious to learn what it was like for you, but like transitioning from being a working professional, right, to being a stay-at-home mom. What was that like for you, particularly like your ego? Because I think that that's something that folks, who want to know are struggling with.
Yes, that is such a good question. You know what? First of all, I went from caring about researching counseling techniques, knowing everything there is to know about, nonprofit worlds. I've been in nonprofit worlds before this, and caring so much about things that you need to care about to carry out your job, right? In the professional setting. I went from all of that mattering to waking up and thinking and obsessing sometimes over wake windows, nap times, nutrition. What am I going to buy my daughter? Make her for dinner tomorrow. The extreme
mental load
when it comes to, you're going from a professional setting where you're on, and it's a different type of on. Being a stay-at-home mom is beyond, by far, the hardest job ever. When I realized that I was struggling a little bit more, right? Because you have to remember, Savannah was already almost a toddler. She just turned 1. I was pregnant with my second daughter, and thinking through, how am I going to keep up with my toddler, right? Her demands, her attention, she needs me to sit on the floor with her and play with her.
Yeah.
If that's my job as a stay-at-home mom, but my belly's growing, I need to take those blood thinners. I need to make sure I'm not sitting on my behind too long. Like that was my mental workload. Not, is this report due on the deadline? Are we making sure that we're making progress? Am I doing a good job with my clients in, couples therapy? That was different, that they're very extreme. But I will say, in terms of ego, there's nothing like having a toddler stare at you dead in the eye and being your boss for the day.
Right.
I tell people like this, at this point in my life, you cannot hurt my feelings. You know why? My 2-year-old will do it for you better any other given day. She can hurt my feelings. Nobody else can hurt my feelings at this point in life. I'm sure Layla will grow and eventually talk back too, but
right. It was so funny when you told me that you had taken the offer. I felt like, damn, I'm like losing my mama friend we have like this similar kind of, story in the sense of, transitioning, right? So you are what, about 6 to 8 weeks back in the workforce?
Yes. Yep.
So what has the transition been like for you?
So it is hectic, a lot of scheduling. So I will say, once I took this job, my husband and I had to have a hard discussion about daycare for our daughter, for Savannah, who she was just turning 2. And putting it again into context, we're in a pandemic, lack of socialization. We really kept to ourselves, other than my niece, who's 6 months younger than her. So there was some kind of playtime, but developmentally, I had so much guilt about what I couldn't do throughout my pregnancy with her. And then now I had her little sister, caring for them both. So when I got this job, we kind of knew, okay, we're going to put her into school. I second guessed whether everything was happening too fast. And it ended up being, we looked for a daycare, we interviewed some daycares, we found a daycare that we really liked. Enrollment happened. Within a week, she was in daycare. Loves school right now. And so that was my biggest anxiety. Pandemic, sending her to school. But guess what? We're doing it. She's getting her socialization in, she's getting her developmental extra activities kind of in, hands-on activities. And I love that she is able to grow outside of our household a little bit, right? And so our 5-month-old is still at home with us. So what that means though, and what that looks like, my husband has a state job and he has a director level job too. And so it's really messy every day. Like we just take it day by day. But when we wake up, we kind of go over our schedules. And I do love that we have the opportunity to still have our daughter at home, the second one, but we know she will be going back too. So transition is hard overall. And I will say, I'm trying my best to keep it together, be at the level where I feel is appropriate to also manage a team that I have, make sure that I'm on point, but also acknowledging my family still will always come first. And that's something that I stand by no matter what.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's it like being able to talk to adult humans on the regular as opposed to toddlers? Is that exciting to to do and to use a different part of your brain again?
So I don't know about the talking to other humans just yet, but I will say I am so excited to do the work that I do. As I mentioned before, I work at a local health nonprofit. So we focus on access to health for underserved populations, uninsured or underinsured. And so I'm very passionate about ensuring that our community really does have access to these things and that we're not just writing a mission statement on a website, we're actually doing it. And so that's part of my community engagement role. And again, it really re-sparked that fire that I've always had in me to ensure that, yes, we thankfully are blessed to have a good life. We work hard for our good life. And we also want to make sure that we are, or at least for me, I'm in a space where I can do this job and feel passionate about it, regardless of adults and other things that happen in staff and organizational culture. Some of those things you can't avoid. And so I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to do the good work. And I think I still need to work on my mommy friend load and having those conversations, because I'd rather get stimulated still about that stuff than work stuff.
I can dig that. No, I can totally dig it. Well, listen, I kudos to you for going back. I think that you have given some mamas who have contemplated going back to the workforce a little bit of hope, and knowing that the transition can be smooth-ish,
Oh,
right?
and I just want to really quickly add, my family does not get a warm meal every day, unfortunately. It is a struggle. It's a struggle. So reality is that sometimes we can't do it all, and that's okay. Like it is really okay. Take it day by day. That's what we do in this household. Take it day by day.
That's all we can do, girl. Because as I was coming downstairs to do this interview, I was like, wait, I didn't make dinner. But listen, the toddler is fed, and that's all that matters. Me and daddy will fend
Yes.
for ourselves. We'll figure it out.
The loudest person in the house.
No, that's real. And that is totally the toddler.
Yep.
You know, I think that, you know, in the, like you said, in the times of social media, it's like all of these different, images, right? Those that are conscious, subconscious, how it affects us, how we view ourselves. I think we were talking the other day and I was just like, or I was talking to you or another mama friend. And I was just like, oh, I just feel like I should have been doing all of these things, right? With the girls, right? We should have had an Easter egg hunt. I had to do, a fancy Easter basket, right? My girlfriend was supposed to come over. I was like, girl, we got to do the Easter baskets, this and the other. And she was like, girl, we don't need to do that shit. I was like, you're right. Let's just take a walk in the wagon, right? And they sang and they had a complete blast. And so it's just, it's really interesting. But I think that what we are able to do as well is kind of create, like I create playlists all the time. And with those playlists, it's like there's a song that, talks about loving her hair, or there are images of little girls that look like her. So, just being very intentional about that. If I'm going to Old Navy, I wanted to have a little brown or a black mermaid on it, right? So that's what's important.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because even though I will say this too on even whether it's continuing generational patterns or breaking them, you know, for the reason why I was also raised with such love, and I talk about it that way, is because my mom, and she openly talks about her experience. I come from an immigrant parent household, and my mom came and to this country, but also when she had us, she was very, very intentional. She educated herself. She read the books. She read the like she would tell my sister and I all of this. Obviously, now that we're older and we're mothers, we totally understand a lot more. But really, those creating those spaces where you can feel, or at least for me, creating those spaces that I can fill intentionally space for my girls to build their confidence, look at the mirror, see reality, right? Because again, we have, I mean, my 2-year-old knows how to take a picture. I don't know a lot of toddlers that don't know how to use the iPhone or any type of phone or device, right? And it's really easy to mix up reality and to mix up what you're supposed to look like, what you're supposed to dress like, what you're supposed to act like, what your values are. So I'm a firm believer, and it starts here, at least if you have the space and capacity, and if you have a support system to do that, be intentional about that. And that's really what I'm hoping to do, but it's no easy task. And I know that that's going to be something that for a lifetime we'll have to work on. I still need to work on it myself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that that's the whole notion behind conscious parenting, right? It's like this consistent something. It's not like, oh, I'm conscious today and I don't have to be conscious anymore, but it's like constantly being conscious of those things. But I also think one of the hard things about parenting little girls is that they are watching everything that you do, not what you say, what it is that you do, right? And so it makes me just so much more hyper aware of myself. And I think that it challenges me to consistently try to become a better version of myself as each day passes, right? So
that's that,
yes. But I mean, I think that in that vein around like intentionality, I think that one of the things that I find most dope about you is the fact of your intentionality, because in the Shabazz household, y'all got a whole lot of intersectionality that's going on, right? You've got the intercultural, interracial, and in the interfaith household, right? It's a beautiful thing. And so what's it like being like a conscious mama, you know, to make sure that your girls not only know that they're Afro-Latina, right? Or, you know, that we are raised in a Muslim household. Like, talk to me about that. Like, what is that process?
Yeah. So I will say there is no black and white answer to this. And I love that about us though, right? So to give context, I am half Puerto Rican, half Ecuadorian, but I was born and raised here. And my husband is black, blackity black. And he was raised Muslim and I was raised Catholic. And I mean, I can only speak for myself in terms of how I grew spiritually and what I believe, you know, faith versus institution. Those are things that I've always said. Being in an interfaith marriage was the first time that I actually chose, you know, my religion or my version of faith, because I had to now explain it to somebody else who's never experienced it. The same way I had to learn his religion or understand the values and the culture, because I obviously wanted to know, what does that entail? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for our relationship? So that's not something that happened overnight. That in itself, being in an interfaith marriage and then deciding to have kids required so many conversations. And again, some of them are open-ended, some of them ... We don't have the answers, right? You kind of go and grow and decide as you go. You don't have actually a script to work off of, right? There is, for my household right now, one of the conversations we're having is baptism, no baptism. You know, the girls, for example, my family is very, very festive. We celebrate Christmas, Easter, everything, you know, we're all about getting together. So on the flip side, you know, I just had this conversation with my mother-in-law the other day. she was mentioning gifts for the Eid, for the Muslim culture. And I love that. I love that there is so much openness within both of our families, right? And I know that that's also not always the case. And so I definitely recognize that. But at least here in this household, the way that my husband and I talk about it is really value based. And if we weren't together based on certain values and understanding of humanity and life, and, what I want my girls to know is that they obviously can sing, dance to salsa, rap. Like, we love our music. We love having dance sessions. We have them often. We love books that provide context about, differences. But ultimately, I just want them to understand that whether there's a book, whether there's a song, whether there's a script about it, or a religion, institution, I don't care. We're living proof that differences, they don't have to be defined a certain way. They don't have to just be, scripted, essentially. And again, I love that about us, and we're still learning as we go. So there is no, again, ... We'll see what's to come next.
That's awesome. What's funny about, I too have an intercultural and religious or interfaith marriage as well. I anticipated the cultural differences, right? But I honestly, I didn't think that like religion would be as big of a topic as it was in our household. And I think that really it had to do with like our actual wedding versus anything else. And I also would say the wedding, as well as like the whole godparent thing. With the Catholic faith, my husband is Catholic. I grew up non-denominational. And for me, I really, really struggled with the whole idea of, if a godparent is not Catholic, then they can't be a godparent. And so let's just say that is a conversation that has an ellipsis in our family right now. COVID came. So
listen, anytime, for me at least, and the way I process some of this in my household, anytime I start to think about the barriers as to why, and if they're not actual answers that apply. So with that example of like, godparents have to be Catholic or in a Catholic church. And, if that is truly a barrier, or even if it was an issue for my husband to be Muslim and be represented in the Catholic church, then I don't belong there. I'm not forcing my family in spaces. And I'm very adamant about that. Yes. I am not forcing my family in spaces where we are not welcomed. And it's okay. It is okay. Y'all could have that.
I can dig that.
My family needs to grow and understand that, we are surrounded by love. We have other places and spaces where we are celebrated. And if it becomes a conversation where an institution, whether it be government, whether it be religious institutions, are creating more of a barrier, then maybe I don't belong in that space. And that's why I say ... because it's easier said than done.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think that with both myself and my husband, we both have our, strong-headed beliefs. I will say that as someone who he grew up kind of very in an extreme kind of like religious household, I think that he has come around a lot in terms of, just the way in which he views religion. But I think that faith is something at the end of the day that is very important to both of us. And it's a value that both of us value. And, as a household, that's important. And that's what's most important. So listen, I thank you so much for sharing your story today. I got a quick question for you. What made you decide to share your story with the Sister Circle community?
Well, I thoroughly believe in everything that you're doing, Faith. I so appreciate that there's even a platform to share my story. I think there's so many stories that exist out there. And I will say this, I still have yet to fully process what I went through. And it's something that I know, again, I need to be intentional. The same way I preach about therapy and I'm a therapist myself, I need to do that for myself. There are things that when you have kids, life goes 0 to 100, 0 to 1,000, and you don't really make that time. It's hard. It's really hard. There's no way around it. Wonder too, or just in general, being a parent, it's hard. And I feel that I'm currently in a space where I can share my story. You know, there are bits and pieces, I'm sure, where I could think about and cry. I could think about and say, oh, I'm so grateful that I got through that, because I did not think I was going to get through that. And so, you know, I think it is important that when the time is right, or if you feel that you are in a space where you want to share that story, because I have no doubt every mother, whether through pregnancy, pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, postpartum, motherhood, all of it, right? We all have an experience to share. And oftentimes the hardest moments I've found in my motherhood experience, it's hard to share those hard experiences, like the ones that you don't really want to talk about, because you're like, I'm a little embarrassed, maybe I'm a little nervous, maybe nobody else is thinking like me. But guess what? When you have the courage and you decide that I do need to reach out and I do need to make space, I may or may not be received in the way that I want to be received, right? I may or may not be in the space with others that are ready to hear or share their stories. When you are ready, there is someone out there. And I know for the fact that for life, whether it's this topic of conversation or not, I find that when we relate the most to each other, or we just kind of share and be in vulnerable spaces, that's the place where we share in love, where you grow, where we really see ourselves as human. So I'm really glad that I had this opportunity, and I hope that, you know, the conversation continues, because there's so much to be said, you know, with motherhood or after.
Absolutely.
After hours, I would say.
Yes, girl. I think that, you know, as it relates to motherhood, we see the pretty bellies and the cute baby pictures and the family photos and stuff. But sometimes, you know, you pull back that cloak and you peel back those layers. Motherhood is complicated. It is complex, and it is the hardest shit that I've ever had to do. Yes. So with that, listen, Queen, I'm sure there's going to be folks that want to be able to follow you, or check out your cute family photos. Listen, you got to teach me how to take photos of the toddlers, because Amara just does not sit still, but it seems like Savi has all of the cute pose photos.
So the quick trick that my sister taught me was that live, you know, when you take your photos, that live feature, which I was not using before, but you just click on that and then you're able to go and actually pick a frame that you actually like within the live of the photo.
Oh, really?
Yes, you have to push edit live and you'll see there's an actual, it looks like almost a video if you hold it down, but you get to pick. Maybe Amara would understand, but
yes, I just learned something new. I'm so excited. Girl, because the toddler, listen, she does not want to sit still. She's all the way live. And speaking of all the way live, I think I hear her upstairs giving daddy a run for his money. Okay. So with that being said, I'm sure folks want to know, how can they follow you if they want to connect with you online? I'll include your social media handles in the show notes. But where can they find you?
So my Instagram, I am on private, but I am happy to accept new followers, especially new mamas or mamas that have heard this story and want to just chat. Please feel free to DM me. My handle is at Tashprez, TASHPREZ.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you, Queen. And it's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. It is truly my hope that you both enjoyed and gained something from it. And if so, be sure to share this episode with another queen that could benefit. Also, if you are willing and able, please leave me a 5-star review wherever you consume your podcast. That is how we spread the good word, y'all. And in the meantime, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at the Sister Circle Podcast. And be sure to check out the website, thesistercirclepodcast.com. There you can subscribe to our mailing list to ensure you get reminders about when new episodes drop and receive our monthly newsletter that's filled with great resources. You can check out our show notes, resources, and blog. And you can send me a message if you want to be on the show, have an idea for the show, would like to collaborate, or sponsor the show. With love, Faith.